Hi, my name is Stevie, and I'm going to be going over our online stats management program, Use My Stats. First, I'd like to go over what a statistic is. A statistic is just a number or amount compared to an earlier number or amount of the same thing. It's really important to be able to track how your business is doing in a completely objective way, rather than based on a gut feeling. You can also troubleshoot problems within the practice by comparing stats to each other and seeing where the breakdown is. The first thing you'll want to do is go to usemystats.com. Next, you'll click the Login button on the upper right-hand corner of the page. If you've just signed up with Silkin, your email address will be the email address that you gave to us when you first signed up. And your password will be letmein12. That's all lowercase, and again that's letmein12. If you are a new staff member and your practice has had this account for a while, you'll need to get the login from the doctor or office manager or whoever has been running the account previously, as it may have changed since it was created. Right now, I'm going to log in using an example company that I've set up. The first thing we're going to look at is the dashboard. This is your main quick access page to see the stats that are most important to you with a quick glance and know where you're at. The great thing about the dashboard is that it can be customized to each user if you have multiple users on your account. That way, you can track what is important to you, and every user can have their own page for this. Now I'll go over how you can add graphs to this dashboard. We'll click the Add Graphs to Dashboard button, and I'm going to use the line graph, as that's what you'll use most likely and most commonly for our purposes. You'll see here there's a drop-down box where you can select which stat you'd like to add to the dashboard. The list has a list of all of the statistics that you are currently keeping track of for your practice. If you've just signed up with us, this list was created based off of the numbers that were given to us with your original paperwork. They are organized by time period, daily, weekly, and monthly. So I'm going to go ahead and select an example stat I've created here. The show option determines what time period is going to show up on that graph on the dashboard. Since I've selected a monthly stat, I won't be able to select current week or current month as a preset, as a monthly stat wouldn't show up on those time frames. So I'm going to select the current quarter. I could also select Custom and select the number of values here. With a monthly stat, 12 values would show me the last 12 months. If this was a weekly stat, 12 values would be 12 weeks, and daily would be 12 days. I'm going to go ahead and select 6 values for 6 months. You'll see these options here for quotas and accumulating. I'm going to leave those unchecked for now, as this is used only for a red line graph. A red line graph is a way to set a target for a certain statistic and keep track of how you're doing in regards to that target throughout the month. I'll go over that on a separate video, as there are a few more steps involved to creating a red line graph. The scale I'm going to leave blank, as the system automatically presets to the highest and lowest value that the statistic has. So that usually works just fine, and we don't need to do anything else here. And I'm going to hit Add, and we'll see that example stat now shows up with the 6 months I selected on the dashboard. Now, if the stat you selected and the graph shows up blank, there may not be any values entered for that time period, depending on what information you gave us with your initial paperwork. And that's okay. Next, I'm going to show you how you can get those values entered so you can start graphing some stats. So next we'll look at the Enter Values option, And you'll see that there are several options here for entering the value. First, we'll look at the stat group entry. Stat entry by group is used when you like to enter values for multiple stats for one single date. So that's most commonly used if it's the end of the week or the month or the day, and you have all of your numbers for all of your stats and you're ready to get those entered. As you can see, it gives me my daily stats first, and it lists each of those that I have in that group. Let's say I wanted to enter in my values for November 4th. I would go up to the date box here and select November 4th and change the date. Then to enter the values, I would click on the value box, type in whatever that value was, and hit save. It's very important that you always hit save so that you're not losing any of the work. And you'll see that now that I've saved those values, they've transposed over into this entered value column, which shows any previously entered values for that date. You can also enter in notes for the statistic, and that's useful if there's anything you want to remind yourself of when you're looking at these statistics later on. Let's say this was a weekly stat and the doctor was out for 2 days out of the week, so we maybe had particularly low production. I might want to enter that in the notes so that if I'm looking in the notes later, I can see why that stat was lower than normal. And that's stat entry by group. Next, we'll take a look at single stat entry. Single stat entry is used when you want to enter values for one statistic for multiple dates. Here you'll see it gives us a drop down to select a stat. I'm going to choose an example weekly stat. You'll see I have a few values entered in here already, but now I have many more dates available to enter for on this particular statistic. You'll also see some notes here, and you'll also see there are a couple of new columns for entered quota and new quota. The new quota column is used when setting up that target for a redline graph. We're not going to worry about that right now, as that's going to be looked at on my video of how to set up a redline. Right now we're just worried about entering in some values. The difference is the new value and entered value are the actual values for this statistic. The entered quota and the new quota are for your targets, your goals, what you would like that statistic to be. Again, all you need to do is enter in a value and hit save. And you'll see that now transposes over into the entered value column. As you can see, this goes back a pretty good ways. But let's say I wanted to enter in some values for October of 2017. I'm going to go back up to the top here, and on my show up to date, I'm going to select October 2017 and hit change date. Now you'll see it gives me dates going even farther back. And you can go as far back as you would like. Gives you the option to go all the way back to 2007, which I don't think anybody would need, as that would take quite a while to enter in values that far back. The option is there if you'd like it. The last option is to import stats from Excel. I'm not going to go over how to do this, as it would only be used in very rare circumstances. Importing stats from Excel is only used if you have a very large data stored on an Excel spreadsheet that you need to get into Use My Stats. If you'd like to do this option, please contact me and I will help you get this set up, as there is a certain format that the values need to be in on the spreadsheet for this to work. But for your purposes, to get you started on Use My Stats, you only need to use the single stat entry and stat group entry options. Next, I'll go over how to take a look at some graphs. So let's go to the graphing option on the menu here, and we're going to select single stat graph. I'm going to zoom out a bit so that you can see the selections all on one page. As you can see, it's preset some settings for me already, but I'm going to change these so that I can see what it is I'd like to see on this graph. Group is where you'll select the group that you want to take a look at. I'm going to look at a weekly stat. And under stat, you select which stat it is you want to show up on your graph. Time period, I'm going to leave automatic. But if I wanted, I could graph my weekly stat on a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis. But as of right now, I just want to look at my weekly stat on a weekly basis. For the date range, I'm going to select the last quarter. I could also select custom and manually enter in the start and end dates here. These dates determine what dates show up on the horizontal axis of the graph. Or you can choose one of these presets. Again, the scale I'm going to leave blank. I'm going to unselect quotas and accumulating, as we are not looking at a red line graph for this graph. Labels just means that the values show up on the graph itself, and notes means that the notes will show up on the bottom of the graph here. Once you've made all of the setting selections that you'd like, please click Regraph Stat and you'll see those applied on the graph. You'll see there are some other options here for overlaying the previous graph period or the prior year, or showing a comparison. These are useful if you're doing a stat analysis and you want to compare how you're doing currently to how you were doing on a previous time period. You can also flip the graph upside down, which is useful if you're looking at a stat that's going up is a negative thing and going down is actually a positive thing. An example of this would be a stat like missed appointments, as you want your missed appointments to be as close to 0 as possible. And those are the basic graphing settings for a single stat graph. I'd also like to show you the data grid, as the data grid is very useful if you'd like to see what values have been entered for a number of dates and a number of statistics. You can select the group here, select the time period and the date range. So let's say I want to know, do my stats go back to 2015? I can update this and it'll show me on a spreadsheet style if I have any values entered for these dates. As you can see, I don't have anything in my weekly stats until January of 2017. And nothing in my weekly stats number 2 and 3. This is just useful if you want to know where data is missing and where you may need to plug in the gaps. You can also export this sheet as an Excel spreadsheet if you need it for any reason. Next, we're going to look at this More tab. The More tab is where you'll find most of the administrative functions that you can do on the Use My Stats site. So first, let's take a look at the Statistics page. This page is where you can add, edit, or make a correction to a statistic. First, I'm going to select Add Stat. That way, if you want to add in any new stats or keep track of anything else, you know how to do that. Under Add Stat, all you need to do is give the stat a name, set the time period. Since I made a weekly stat, I selected weekly. And that's it for the basic of adding a statistic. There are some other options here. There are also some advanced settings that you can explore. But for our purposes, all you need is the name and the time period, and you can hit save. And you'll see that stat now shows up on my list of stats here. Let's say I wanted to delete that stat that I created, or any other stat that I'm keeping track of and no longer need. You'll see this wrench button here, which means edit. This is also where I could change the name of the stat or the time period if I decided I'd like to change some of the settings. But you'll see the deactivate button here would delete this stat. Now let's say, oops, I deleted that stat by accident. Don't worry. Anything that gets deleted is still saved in the system, and you can see it here under Show Deactivated Stat. and then all I would need to do is hit reactivate, and that'll bring back the stat and any values that were entered for it. Let's say I entered a value or a quota incorrectly within a stat, and I need to go in and delete that. You'll see this icon here. I used to think it looked like a crooked signpost, but somebody pointed out that it's probably an icon for whiteout, since it means statistic correction, which makes a lot more sense than the crooked signpost. So you'll see under November 9th, I have a value entered of 450. If I wanted to delete this value, all I would need to do is hit this trash icon here. Let's say I entered a value on a different date, November 2nd. I would just select the date and hit change date, and I would see the value that was entered there. Now we're going to take a look at stat groups. Stat groups are particularly useful if you have a lot of stats that you're keeping track of and you don't want things to get too cluttered as you're going throughout the site. It just makes it easier. As you're going throughout the site, you can see you can filter just about everything by group. So to create a group, you would hit create new, give the group a name, and set the time period for it. You can select whether this applies just to the owner of the account or company-wide if you have multiple users. When you hit save, a list of stats from that time period will show up on the right-hand column. And then to create the group, you would just drag and drop each stat you'd like to add to the left-hand side. It's also worth noting that the groups save their order. So if you want these stats listed in a specific order, make sure they're in that order on this left-hand column, and that'll save throughout the site. I'm now going to go ahead and save my group. If you want to delete a group, you'll just hit this wrench button here and hit delete. When it asks, are you sure, select OK. And you'll see that's no longer on the list. Next, I'm going to show you the users option. This is where you can add users to your account so that they have their own login and access to use my stats. You would hit create new and enter in some basic information for that person. You would give them a first name, enter in their last name, and enter in their email address to use as their username. An email address for the nudges and alerts isn't necessary, but you can enter that if you're going to be setting up any nudges or alerts for any stats. You would also give them a password. This can be a permanent password, or you can make the user change their password when they log in for the first time by selecting this option here. Next, you'll need to determine how much access do they have to your account. Access levels range from full access as site admin to a limited user that can only see explicitly shared statistics on your account. So it's up to you what access level you would like to give this person. Graph appearance, I don't usually change, as this is based on personal preference, and I don't usually have a personal preference for the graph appearance. But if you do, feel free to make changes here. Once you hit save, you'll see that person is now added to the list of users. If you'd like to change your password or the password for anyone on account, you would again just hit this wrench button here and type in a new password and hit save. If I wanted to deactivate the account, let's say the staff member is no longer with us, I would also go into this wrench button and hit deactivate. And that is the basics of usemystats.com. One last thing I'd like to show you is their help option here. They have a really great help site that you can use if you ever get stuck while you're going throughout the website. They have hundreds of articles on everything that this site can do, and the search option here helps you find those. So you can just type in whatever it is you're trying to do, and an article will come up that will help you in order to figure that out. They have pictures, explanations, and description. You can also call Use My Stats helpline at 888-351-7828. That's 888-351-7828. And they have customer service that can help you figure out anything you need. You can also reach me personally at 503-726-1810. I am also happy to help for anything you might need help on or any questions you may have. You can also email me at smaese, which is MAESE, at Silkin, SILKIN, managementgroup.com. Again, that's SMAESE at silkinmanagementgroup.com.